He always said his dream was to wake up to the sound of the ocean. So I sold my apartment, bought a seaside cottage, and gave him the keys. That same evening, he gave me divorce papers. Those words still echo in my memory, not because they shocked me, but because I knew they were coming. He just didn't know that I knew. My name is Elena. I'm 52 years old. I've been married to Patrick for 27 years. Or more accurately, I was. Until the night he mistook my silence for stupidity. We were, by all appearances, the perfect couple. He ran his own consultancy firm. I was a high school administrator, well-organized, emotionally stable, the kind of woman people trust to keep things running. And I did. For years. I managed our calendar, paid the bills, helped him draft his business proposals, cooked for his clients, remembered birthdays, anniversaries, networking events. When Patrick lost a client or a deal, I tightened the budget. When he celebrated a win, I clapped the loudest. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being his partner and became his background, his constant, his convenience. Still, I believed in our marriage. We had built a life together, one that included lazy Sundays, family dinners, and a dream we both shared since our honeymoon, to one day retire by the sea. He used to say, "One day I want to wake up, hear the waves, and feel peace." So when we found a quaint coastal town 3 hours from the city, and I saw a listing for a white-shuttered cottage with a wraparound porch and ocean views, I thought, this is it. I didn't tell Patrick right away. I sold the apartment my aunt had left me, a beautiful, well-located space that was entirely in my name. It had been our safety net for years. Quietly, I closed the deal. I arranged everything under my name, paid in full, decorated the place with soft linen, seaside art, and wind chimes. Then I called Patrick and said, "Pack a bag. I want to show you something." He was delighted. "A surprise?" "This is new," he said, kissing my cheek. "You're spoiling me." We drove there together. He hummed along to his favorite playlist. He held my hand at red lights. At one point, he said, "I love you, you know that? You always make life better." I looked out the window and smiled. "Do I?" I thought. When we pulled up to the cottage, Patrick gasped. "Elena, this is incredible." I handed him the keys. "It's ours," I said softly. He turned to me, eyes glassy. "You bought this for us?" I nodded. "For you, really. You always wanted it." He hugged me tightly. "This changes everything," he whispered. He had no idea how true that was. That night, after dinner, after wine, after a slow walk along the beach, he pulled a folder from his bag. He placed it on the table beside the candlelight. "Elena," he said, "I didn't plan to do this here, but I've met someone. This is divorce paperwork. I thought this would be clean, dignified." He expected me to fall apart, but I just blinked, then smiled. "Thank you," I said. And that's when he began to lose control, and I began to take mine back. People think betrayal comes in a flash, one violent moment, one scandal, one lie. But real betrayal, it's quieter than that. It happens slowly, like water wearing down stone. And by the time you notice, the foundation's already hollow. Patrick and I met when we were both 24, two wildly different people who somehow fit. He was magnetic, impulsive, full of ideas and bold dreams. I was careful, steady, already thinking 5 steps ahead. In many ways, I grounded him, and in return, I thought he made life feel more alive. We got married a year later in a modest ceremony by a lake. No big speeches, no extravagant decor, just the two of us, saying forever without understanding what that would eventually cost. In the early years, I supported both of us while he jumped from startup to startup. He had ideas but never followed through. Still, I believed in him. I edited his pitch decks after work, cooked dinner while he researched markets, used my credit card to keep us afloat while he waited for the next big break. He promised it would all be worth it. That one day, we'd sit on a porch somewhere near the sea with coffee and salt in our hair and laugh at how hard it had been. So I waited. I worked. I adjusted. When I got promoted to department head, Patrick said, "That's great. Less pressure on me now." When I got tenure, he said, "Finally, we have real security." I thought we were building something together. Turns out, I was just giving him soft landings while he rehearsed his next takeoff. Still, I dismissed the red flags, the work trips that got longer, The texts he wouldn't let me read. The quiet nights where he sat beside me, physically present, emotionally absent. I told myself this is what long marriages look like. People get comfortable. They change. And I loved him. Or maybe I loved the idea of us, of who we used to be. I even remember the last time he looked at me the way he used to. It was 2 years ago on our 25th anniversary. We were at a little cabin in the woods, a gift I booked myself because he forgot to plan. We sat under the stars sipping wine, and he said, "You've always been my anchor." Back then, I smiled and thanked him. Now, I realize anchors keep you from drifting, but they can also keep you stuck. When we got back from that trip, something changed. He grew colder, more distracted. Business was stressful, he said. He was tired, overwhelmed, needed space. I offered patience. He took silence. I didn't know then that another woman was already orbiting him. Someone who saw only the shine, not the truth. Someone who hadn't cleaned up after his failures or patched up his broken dreams. Her name would come later, but by then it wouldn't matter. Because by the time Patrick handed me that folder in the seaside cottage, I wasn't a woman caught off guard. I was a woman prepared. And his mistake wasn't cheating. His mistake was thinking I wouldn't know what to do once he did. They say your body knows long before your mind is ready to accept it. Mine did. I started waking up at 3 a.m. with a tightness in my chest. I'd roll over and look at Patrick, asleep, peaceful, undisturbed. Sometimes I'd hear the soft vibration of his phone on the nightstand. He never moved to check it. He had long since learned to silence notifications around me. At first, I blamed myself. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was projecting my own insecurities onto him, that after nearly 3 decades, of course things would feel different. But it was more than distance. It was strategy. He had become too careful, too considerate at the wrong times. He no longer complained about work, but also never let me visit his office. He started forgetting to include me in plans, business dinners, weekend trips, even birthdays. One day, while folding laundry, I found a receipt in his jacket. A boutique hotel across town. The date matched a night he said he was in Baltimore. I turned the paper over and saw her name scribbled in Sharpie, Michelle. Room 203. My hand shook, not from shock, but from clarity. Still, I didn't confront him. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I put the receipt in a file marked House Repairs and slid it under a stack of manuals in my desk drawer. That night, I kissed him goodnight and said I loved him. That was the moment I knew I would leave him. Not emotionally, I had already done that. I would leave him on my terms, and he would never see it coming. Over the next month, I started collecting shadows. I checked our shared bank account. Small transfers, just under $2,000, sent to a new consulting vendor. I Googled the business. It didn't exist. I pulled our credit report. His card had several luxury purchases, jewelry, spa packages, a pair of Italian shoes, size 7 women's. I took screenshots, printed statements, bookmarked every article on digital infidelity tracking. I created a secure folder on a cloud drive and labeled it Garden Plans. One evening, Patrick mentioned a conference in Palm Beach. I smiled, nodded, and booked myself a quiet Airbnb just outside the coastal town we used to dream about. I spent 2 nights walking along the beach, breathing, thinking, remembering who I was before I became his support system. On the 3rd day, I made a decision. I called Danielle, a former student of mine who had become a lawyer. She had once told me at a reunion, "If you ever need legal help, I'm the calm before their storm." She was right. We met for coffee. I showed her everything. The receipts, the bank statements, the prenup. She read it twice, then leaned back. "You've got him. Hard. He won't know what hit him." There was a clause in the agreement, buried, half forgotten, and that said in the case of infidelity, all shared property reverts to the spouse who didn't violate the terms. I remember laughing, not out of joy, but out of poetic disbelief. He had insisted on the prenup back then, to protect his future. Turns out it was my parachute all along. From that moment on, I moved with precision. I reached out to a realtor, quietly listed my apartment, made sure it sold privately. No social media. No signs. Patrick thought I was attending a teacher's retreat. I was finalizing a wire transfer on a house by the sea. A house I bought in my name. With my money. With my peace. All while he planned his grand betrayal. He thought I was blind. But I was watching. And soon he'd learn what it means to be seen. I've always believed that true revenge isn't about destruction. It's about design. I didn't want to ruin Patrick's life. I wanted him to walk straight into the future he'd built and realize every piece of it belonged to me. After Danielle confirmed the prenup strength and advised me on the legal steps, I spent the next 4 weeks orchestrating my departure, but not in a rush. This wasn't about escape. It was about timing. I began by finalizing the sale of my apartment. Quietly, discreetly. The buyer was a retired couple who loved the layout and paid in cash. It was clean, fast. The proceeds went directly into a separate account in my name, shielded from joint access, documented with Danielle's help. Then I went house hunting. The cottage wasn't just perfect, it was poetic. A little white home nestled between dunes, facing the Atlantic, with pale blue shutters and a weathered deck. The realtor called it a place for peaceful living. I called it the final chess move. I purchased it in full. No mortgage. No trace of Patrick's name. Then I did what no one expects from a woman who's been betrayed. I planned a surprise. I told Patrick I wanted to take a weekend off, just the two of us. I pitched it as a spontaneous trip to recharge. I mentioned nothing about the stress I'd seen on his face lately or the late-night texts he thought I didn't notice. He lit up like a child at Christmas. You're serious? Just us? That's unexpected. I smiled. You've been working hard. You deserve a break. He didn't know I meant from pretending. The day we left, I packed his favorite snacks, curated a playlist, and acted like the woman he used to love. Or the version of her he remembered. Dependable, sweet, naive. He held my hand in the car and said, You've been different lately. Softer. It's nice. I nodded. I've been thinking a lot about the future. When we pulled up to the cottage, he stared, stunned. Elena, you bought this? I handed him the keys. It's yours. He blinked. You mean ours, right? I smiled. He spent the first hour exploring every room, running his fingers along the wooden beams, gazing out the kitchen window at the waves. I can't believe you did this for me, he said, voice low. For us, I corrected. Isn't this what you always wanted? He kissed my forehead. It is. It's perfect. That night, I cooked dinner, shrimp pasta and white wine. He toasted to beginnings. I toasted to endings. And after dessert, he did it. He pulled a folder from his bag, cleared his throat, and said, There's something I need to tell you. I already knew. He slid the papers across the table. Divorce papers. Cleanly typed. He'd even highlighted the clause about fair asset division. Bold of him. I've met someone, he said. It wasn't planned, but it's real. I didn't want to do this here, but this just felt right. He smiled like he expected me to break. But I didn't. I simply slid a second folder from my own bag and placed it beside his. What's this? He asked. A response, I said. He looked confused, then opened it. Inside was my legal filing, our prenup clause highlighted, copies of his financial discrepancies, photos of him and Michelle at a hotel, and a cover letter from Danielle. He went pale. Wait, you knew. For a while, I said softly. I just wanted you to see your dream come true before I took it back. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. That's when I stood. I kissed his cheek. Enjoy your evening, Patrick. You won't be staying here. And I walked out the door, locked it behind me, and left him sitting in a cottage he thought he owned, surrounded by proof that he had already lost it all. I drove back to the city that night with the windows down, the wind cold against my face, and something I hadn't felt in years, clarity. I didn't cry. I didn't replay the moment he handed me those papers. I didn't feel regret. What I felt was peace. The kind you only find once you've stopped pretending someone else deserves your silence. By the time Patrick tried to call me, I had already blocked his number. I knew he'd try all the stages. Confusion, anger, pleading. I had no interest in hearing any of them. Danielle had already filed the official divorce response with the court. Attached was the prenup, the evidence of infidelity, the financial records of his secret withdrawals, and our request to freeze all joint assets pending a full investigation. That meant he could no longer access our retirement savings. Our joint credit cards were disabled. The consulting firm's business account, the one I had helped build, was flagged for audit after a quiet tip from Danielle about suspicious withdrawals. Michelle, as it turned out, didn't like men who couldn't pay for champagne and penthouses. By Wednesday, she was gone. I didn't have to lift a finger. But I did send Patrick one message. It was short. Just a photo of a signed document, the cottage deed, with my name and only my name typed in bold. Underneath, I typed, "You said this was your dream. Thank you for giving me a reason to make it mine." He didn't reply. Instead, I got a message from his lawyer the next day, a vague attempt to dispute ownership of the cottage and request access for personal belongings. Danielle sent back a 2-line email. Our client is not obligated to provide access to a property solely owned under her name. All property rights remain legally protected under the marital infidelity clause. Kindly refer to the attached. The attachment? That same prenup Patrick had proudly drafted 27 years ago when I had more money than he did. The one he insisted we sign to protect his future. Now it was his ruin. The locks on the cottage were changed the day after I left. I made sure the utilities were transferred to my name and that every legal record pointed to sole ownership. Danielle handled all communications. I never had to speak to him again. That Friday, I visited the cottage alone. The air was different without him, lighter. Even the floorboards seemed to breathe easier. I placed fresh flowers in the kitchen window and lit the fireplace. I sat on the porch with a glass of wine, listening to the waves, the very sound he once said would make him feel whole. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. He had tried to replace me, but I had already replaced him. Not with another man, but with freedom, with silence, with self-worth. Patrick's consulting business began collapsing shortly after. Without access to funds, and with rumors circling about fraud, his clients started pulling away. He sent one desperate email to Danielle, asking if I'd be willing to settle quietly to avoid damage to his professional reputation. She responded with one sentence. My client has already settled with herself. No further response. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Patrick moved into a small rented apartment in the outskirts of town. The fancy car was returned. Michelle blocked him on everything. He had told her he was about to be financially free. In the end, he was just not the way he imagined. As for me, I started sleeping in the cottage full time. The bed felt bigger without resentment. The rooms echoed with peace. I started reading again, writing again, breathing again. I didn't celebrate. I didn't dance. I simply existed. And after all those years of shrinking to fit into Patrick's plans, that in itself was the loudest revenge of all. The courtroom wasn't dramatic. No shouting. No slamming fists. Just paperwork, calm voices, and consequences. Patrick sat on one side, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. His suit was wrinkled, collar wilted, hair slightly disheveled like he hadn't slept. I wore navy blue, clean lines, no makeup, just confidence. Danielle stood beside me, poised and quiet. She wasn't there to fight. She was there to win. The judge reviewed the files, infidelity evidence, account withdrawals without spousal consent, hotel receipts, text messages, the prenup. It was all there, neatly arranged in color-coded tabs. Patrick's lawyer tried to argue the prenup had aged out, that it was signed under different financial conditions. The judge, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense, looked at him and said, Section 14 states clearly the agreement applies for the duration of the legal marriage. That includes the present. His lawyer fumbled, flipping through the document like he hadn't expected that page to exist. Danielle leaned over and whispered to me, They thought you were bluffing. Patrick finally spoke. Elena, can't we handle this like adults? We were married for 27 years. That has to mean something. I looked at him. It does, I said. That's why this hurts. But that's also why I'm not letting you rewrite history. The judge ruled within the hour. all jointly held accounts to remain frozen until the final settlement. Patrick forfeits any claim to the seaside cottage. I retain 100% of the proceeds from my sold apartment. Court costs is to cover. Patrick's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. His eyes didn't meet mine. Afterward, in the hallway, he tried again. Elena, I was lost. I made a mistake. No, I replied. You made a plan. I just made a better one. He nodded slowly, swallowing the last bit of pride he had left. That night, I returned to the cottage. The sky was overcast. Rain tapped softly on the windows. I brewed tea, wrapped myself in a shawl, and stared at the sea, steady, endless, honest. 2 days later, the cracks in Patrick's life deepened. Word spread in his professional circle. A client I used to make tea for during their meetings called me personally. I heard what happened, she said. I never liked the way he spoke to you. If you ever want consulting work, let me know. Another message came from an old friend of his. I'm sorry, Elena. I didn't know it had gone so far. You deserved better. Even his sister reached out. She'd once stood beside him during family dinners, blindly loyal. Now her text simply read, I was wrong, and I'm proud of you. And Michelle? She left a voicemail. Short, bitter. He said he had money, said he had control. Turns out he doesn't even have the house. I deleted it. I didn't need her apologies, just as I didn't need his explanations, because I already had the truth, and peace, and the property deed. I had everything that mattered. The rest? Let it collapse. Let it all fall where it belongs, behind me. The cottage felt different now. Not like a getaway. Not like a place I had to share. It felt like mine. The kitchen smelled like fresh bread again. I let the windows stay open longer. I filled the rooms with books and plants, things Patrick never noticed but always complained were clutter. There were no more hushed arguments in my head. No more tension in the silence. Just the sound of the sea, the occasional creak of old wood, and the peace of my own breathing. I started doing small things I hadn't done in years. I joined a local reading group at the town library. I baked pies for the weekly market just to share. I even signed up to teach a short community workshop, how to understand your finances after divorce. At first, only 3 women showed up. By the second session, it was standing room only. Widows, young wives with questions, single mothers, women who'd handed their financial lives over, just like I once had, and were now searching for the manual they were never given. I didn't preach. I simply shared what I had learned the hard way. And they listened. One of them, a soft-spoken woman named Rachel, hugged me after class. You have no idea how much you helped me, she said. I thought I was alone. I smiled. I thought that too, I told her. Danielle called one evening and asked if I'd be interested in forming a small team, helping other women navigate complex divorces with dignity and strategy. I said yes, not out of revenge, but because I finally understood something. I wasn't made to just endure someone else's chaos. I was made to rebuild, to guide, to live, not for someone else's comfort, but for my own peace. And for the first time in decades, I woke up to the sound of waves, not as the woman who gave everything to someone who didn't deserve it, but as the woman who finally, completely, and beautifully belonged to herself. The final court hearing took place on a rainy Tuesday morning. Patrick arrived alone. No entourage, no smile, just a man who looked like he hadn't stood in the sun in weeks. He wore the same gray suit from our first session, except now it looked like it belonged to someone else. I didn't bring anyone either. I didn't need backup. I had already won everything worth keeping. The hearing lasted under an hour. The judge upheld every term of the prenup. My sole ownership of the cottage was confirmed. The remaining investments were split exactly as the agreement allowed. 80% to me, 20% to him. He barely nodded. As we left the courtroom, he tried to speak. Elena, he said softly, if I had known it would end like this. I turned to him, calm, steady. It didn't end like this, Patrick. It ended a long time ago. You just didn't notice. He looked like he wanted to argue, or cry, or maybe just run. But instead he said nothing, and I walked away. No drama, No speeches, just heels on marble, echoing softly down a hallway that didn't belong to either of us anymore. Back at the cottage, the rain had stopped. A breeze moved through the curtains. My mug of tea was still warm, and the sea was calm again, as if it had been waiting for me. I opened the back door and stepped onto the porch barefoot. The wind chime rang gently above me. That afternoon, I opened a new journal. The first page, blank and waiting. At the top I wrote, "You don't always get closure from them. Sometimes you give it to yourself." I smiled, then closed the book, because this wasn't the end. It was the beginning, not of revenge, not of rebuilding, but of rediscovery. The life I had handed away in pieces was back in my hands, stronger, quieter, more mine than ever. Patrick had dreamed of a house by the sea. I gave it to him, and then I kept it, along with everything he never truly saw in me. The steak was half cut on my plate, untouched, bleeding just a little. The candles flickered soft orange over my wine glass. Across from me, my sister adjusted her white lace engagement dress for the 5th time, giggling into her fiancé's shoulder like we were filming a rom-com. But my hands were trembling. I smiled anyway, cleared my throat, and slid the little black envelope across the table. "Just something to help you two get started." My mom gasped. My dad finally looked up from his phone. Even my brother paused mid-bite. Inside that envelope was a receipt for a $2,000 venue deposit, a fully paid professional photographer, and an $8,000 cashier's check. My sister blinked, then blinked again. "Oh my God," she whispered. For a moment I saw it, softness in her face. Gratitude, almost awe. Then her fiancé leaned over, peeked inside the envelope and chuckled. He didn't whisper. He wanted everyone to hear. "Wow," he said, smiling at me like I was an overeager stranger. "She's really trying to matter again." My sister laughed. Not a fake, nervous laugh. A real one, sharp and shared, like an inside joke I didn't get. My mom giggled behind her hand. And that was when I felt it. Something split down the center of me. Clean. Quiet. I reached for the envelope, slid it back across the table, and tucked it into my purse. They were still laughing when I stood up. "Let me try less," I said, calm as water. And I walked out. I didn't look back. 10 minutes later, the venue manager, whose number was still listed under my name, called my sister. He informed her that the booking was canceled. The deposit was non-refundable. The photographer texted her fiancé, "Per Aaron's request, your date is off my books." The bank transfer for rent bounced right back into my account. I had unlinked their address that morning. By the time they left the restaurant, they had no venue, no photographer, and no money. Just a growing sense of dread and 3 wine glasses left untouched. They thought they'd shamed me into silence. They thought they could humiliate me at their celebration, and I'd still sit there smiling, paying, performing. But they forgot something. I wasn't trying to matter. I was trying to be kind. And when kindness is met with cruelty, well, they wanted a performance. Instead, they got a warning. I was 11 when my mom first called me the reliable one. It was over something small, making dinner while she was late from work, watching my little sister so she could rest. But I remember the way she said it, like it was a compliment, like being responsible was some kind of crown. I wore it proudly for years. Straight A's, babysitting jobs, no parties, no dating until college. Always the one who picked up the slack when someone dropped the ball, which in my house was often. My sister Natalie, she dropped them daily. Speeding tickets? I paid 3. Credit card debt? I covered it twice. Once without even telling her I did. Rent shortfalls? Constant. She'd cry, promise to get her life together, and my parents would say things like, "She's still figuring it out?" Not everyone matures early like you, Aaron. That was the pattern. I was the plan B, the backup parent, the fixer. Natalie, on the other hand, she was the sunshine, the princess, the one they joked would marry rich and solve everything. Except she never married rich. She just dated guys who looked expensive, posted filtered photos, and borrowed from me when rent was due. There was one week. I just started a new job, hadn't even got my first paycheck yet. when she called sobbing because her power was about to be shut off. I drove an hour in a snowstorm to hand her cash. No thank you. No hug. Just, next time, please bring groceries too. I have nothing here. And I did. Next time and the next time and the next. It wasn't just her. My parents leaned into it too. They asked me to co-sign loans I didn't benefit from. Asked if they could temporarily list my house as a collateral asset when they refinanced their second mortgage. I said yes, because that's what the reliable one does. They don't ask why the house needs refinancing. They just show up, sign, pay, smile. I kept telling myself it was love, that they loved me, that they must, right? Because who lets someone give this much and doesn't love them back? Who lets their daughter sink herself in quiet debt just to hold the family together? But then came the engagement dinner, and the card, and the laughter. I watched Natalie laugh at me at the biggest, most generous gift I'd ever given, like I was a joke at my own table. I didn't matter. Not really. Not to her. Not to any of them. The gift wasn't proof of love. It was proof of my role. Because in their story, I wasn't a sister. I was just a service. I started noticing the way he looked at me. Not at me, really, through me. Like I was a number. A resource. A means to a very comfortable end. Tyler, my sister's fiancé, was charming, sure. Good teeth, expensive watch, smile like a salesman. And he knew it. When I first met him, he said, "So you're the sister/sponsor?" I laughed awkwardly. Thought it was just a weird joke. But then it kept happening. Little digs, always with a smile. "You must really love working, huh?" "Wow, another check? You trying to outshine the bride. You're like a third parent to Natalie, maybe even the richer one." He said these things with a chuckle, a clink of his whiskey glass, like we were friends roasting each other at a party. But it wasn't friendly. It was framing. He knew what he was doing. And my sister? She didn't stop him. She laughed along, egged it on. That's when I realized Tyler wasn't some anomaly. He was a mirror, a perfect reflection of my family's values. Take, joke, belittle, repeat. One night, I came over to drop off an RSVP list Natalie had forgotten at my place. Their apartment was dark, but the front door was cracked. I knocked, then stepped inside. Tyler was on the phone, pacing in the kitchen. "No, man, I'm not worried. She's desperate to belong. Let her pay. She'll keep doing it. It makes her feel needed." Silence. Then he laughed. A cold, flat sound. I slipped out before he saw me. I sat in my car for almost an hour, gripping the steering wheel, my heart pounding like a threat. Desperate to belong. Let her pay. I thought about every time Natalie had come to me with a teary voice and a "please, just this one time." Every time Tyler had smirked when I offered to help. Every time my parents had called me amazing right after they asked for something. I wasn't family. I was a fund. This engagement wasn't about love. It was about the optics, the venue, the curated Instagram life. I wasn't the sister giving a gift. I was the ATM keeping the illusion alive. That night, I pulled up my bank statements, looked at every dollar I'd transferred, every time I'd bailed them out, covered rent, bought groceries, paid off bills that weren't mine. It wasn't just the money. It was the expectation. And the worst part? They didn't even try to hide it anymore. Because people don't hide things from objects. They just use them. And I was done being used. Because Tyler didn't love my sister. Not really. He didn't want her. He wanted what I could give her. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't storm out of that restaurant. Instead, I smiled. And in that smile was every quiet, calculated thing I was about to do. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, made myself coffee, and started unraveling the illusion, piece by piece. First, the venue. I called them directly, not the coordinator. Set an in-person meeting. When I arrived, I brought all the receipts, ID, bank records. Proof the deposit was from my account, under my name with my signature on every line. The manager, a woman named Carla, looked at me and said, "You still want the date reserved?" I paused, then smiled. Yes, but no one else is authorized to change or access anything, not even the couple. Carla nodded. Understood. Step 2, the photographer. He was a friend of a friend, a talented guy I'd paid in full to secure his time. I called him, explained the situation vaguely, and said I might cancel. He didn't ask questions, just said, "You gave me a good rate. I'll hold off booking anyone else, but your contract is your call." Then came the big one, the money. I went to the bank, sat down with an advisor, told them the $8,000 was technically a gift, but I wanted legal protection in case things turned complicated. They helped me file a notarized statement. Gift pending on conditions not yet fulfilled. No shared accounts. No co-signed anything. In short, nothing traceable. Nothing owed. I was done being their safety net. Done being their plan B. From the outside, though, you'd think I was planning the royal wedding. I kept replying to Natalie's texts. Kept saying things like, "So excited," and "You'll be the most beautiful bride." She ate it up. Tyler sent me a meme once, a joke about rich aunts funding chaos. I didn't even respond, because the party they were planning, it wasn't real. The venue, mine to cancel. The photographer, already fading. The $8,000, sitting in a different account now, untouched, protected, but I let them build it anyway. The Instagram posts, the floral Pinterest boards, the endless group chats about signature cocktails and bridesmaid shades. I watched them get drunk on fantasy, watched them climb higher and higher into their storybook. Because here's the thing about revenge. You don't need to push people off a cliff. Sometimes you just have to step back and let them fall. The restaurant was upscale, dim lights, ivory tablecloths, gold-trimmed menus. One of those places where the server refills your water after every sip. I wore navy. Simple, classic, forgettable. Because tonight wasn't about me. At least, not to them. It was Natalie and Tyler's engagement dinner. The soft launch of their new identity as a power couple. My parents were glowing. My brother flew in just to play favorite. The table was buzzing with future plans. The venue, the bridal shower, the honeymoon in Cabo. All ideas they assumed I'd be funding. I smiled through all of it, played my part, the generous sister, the reliable one, and when dessert was cleared, I stood up and said, "I have something special for you both." I reached into my bag, pulled out the envelope, and placed it gently in front of them. The gold trim glinted under the chandelier. Everyone leaned in. Inside was the full breakdown, paid in full venue deposit, a signed contract from a top-tier photographer, and an enclosed check for $8,000 made out to Natalie. Gasps. Even Tyler looked impressed. My mother clutched her chest. For a moment, a brief, flickering moment, I saw something close to gratitude in Natalie's eyes. And then Tyler leaned in, glanced at the card, and said it. Wow, she's really trying to matter again. He said it like a joke, but he said it loud enough for the whole table to hear. My sister laughed. Not politely. Not nervously. She laughed like it was hilarious. My father looked down at his drink. My mother said nothing. I picked up the envelope, slid it back into my bag, looked around at the people I had supported, paid for, protected. Then I said calmly, "Let me try less." And I walked out. No shouting. No tears. No last words. I walked into the quiet evening air and let the door shut behind me like a gavel. 10 minutes later, I was in my car when my phone buzzed. Natalie, 7 missed calls. Mom, 2 missed calls. Tyler, 1 text. What the hell did you do? And then a voicemail from Carla at the venue. Hi. Just confirming the cancellation as requested earlier this week. The deposit has been released. We've voided the event date. Let us know if you need anything else. Then the texts came like fireworks. Natalie, you canceled the venue? Mom, call me now. Tyler, you messed up everything. Is this some kind of joke? Natalie, where's the photographer? They're not answering. Mom, the rent didn't go through this month. Did you change something? Yes. Yes, I did. The deposit? Refunded. The photographer? Never confirmed. The $8,000? Back in my name. The rent? No longer my responsibility. They weren't just embarrassed. They were exposed. Because this whole time, they thought I was trying to earn love. Desperate for attention. Begging for approval. They were wrong. I wasn't desperate. I was done. And when I left that restaurant, I didn't raise my voice. I raised the stakes. The backlash came fast. Angry calls, bitter voicemails, a family group chat that lit up like a forest fire. How could you embarrass her like this? You humiliated your sister in front of everyone. After everything she's done for you? Everything she's done for me? Right. But I stayed silent. I didn't reply, didn't explain, because the collapse had already started. First, the photographer posted an open date announcement, same day as the wedding. Sudden change of plans, he wrote. Now booking. Mutuals tagged Natalie. Comments section exploded. Then came the venue update. A luxury wellness brand had snagged the date. Full buyout. Non-refundable. Gone. Tyler called me. I let it go to voicemail. You think this is funny? You made your sister look like a beggar in front of her friends. We've been scrambling all day. You better fix this. I didn't fix it. Instead, I blocked his number. That night, Natalie's Instagram went private. She deleted half the wedding posts. Change of plans, her caption said, followed by a heart emoji that didn't fool anyone. But the worst was still coming. The landlord called them, said the rent check bounced. When Natalie told them I'd always handled it, he said, well, not anymore, she doesn't. They were 2 months behind and hadn't even known. Turns out when you build your whole life on someone else's effort and they stop trying, everything starts to fall apart. Tyler's friends started whispering. One of them leaked a screenshot, him bragging in a group chat, calling me the financial buffer. He became the punchline. A man who couldn't afford a wedding without his fiancée's older sister. Sponsors backed out. Venue gone. Vendors gone. Wedding canceled. And so was the engagement. I didn't hear about it from them. I heard it from a mutual friend who worked in event planning. Tyler walked out, she whispered. Said Natalie wasn't ready for real life. That everything she had was borrowed. Natalie called me 3 days later. Voicemail. You ruined everything. I was happy. He was the one. And you made him think I was pathetic. Long pause. I needed you. And you vanished. I stared at the screen. No reply. Because she wasn't wrong. She did need me. But only to clean up. Only to fund, fix, or forgive. I gave them everything once. My money. My time. My silence. This time I gave them nothing. And it broke them. For the first time in my life, the silence felt like mine. No guilt. No obligation. No waiting for someone to need me before I felt like I had a place. The phone stopped ringing after a while. The messages turned from rage to guilt to silence. I didn't block them all, I just muted the noise. The absence was peaceful. I moved to a smaller apartment. Cheaper. Cozier. Mine. With the money I would have spent on a wedding I wasn't invited to, I started something small, a mentorship program for girls from homes like mine. We met in borrowed spaces at first. Coffee shops. Community rooms. Libraries. They didn't need thousands of dollars. They needed someone who'd been there and made it out. Every time one of them said, I thought I was the only one, I remembered why I walked away. Why I had to. In between work and the mentorship, I started writing. Anonymously at first. A blog. Not Their Wallet, that was the name. It wasn't just about me. It was about the girls who were raised to be providers, therapists, housekeepers, anything but daughters. It was about the quiet grief of realizing your family only loved you for what you could give. It took off slowly, then quickly. People emailed. DMs poured in. Women from everywhere. This is my story. How did you know? You're putting into words what I've never been able to say. I kept writing. The blog gave me a voice. But more than that, it gave me proof. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't selfish. I wasn't bitter. I was just finally free. Free to say no. Free to not explain myself. Free to stop performing for applause I never got. I stopped overgiving. I set boundaries. If someone asked too much of me, I said, that's not something I can do right now. And I didn't follow it with an apology. I stopped trying to be the good one. Stopped showing up to events I wasn't invited to. Stopped wondering if they missed me. Because I finally understood they didn't miss me. They missed what I did for them. And I was done mistaking that for love. Some nights, I reread the messages Natalie sent after everything fell apart. The ones where she said, "You left me when I needed you." But I didn't. I left when I needed me. I think that's the part that scared the most. Not that I said goodbye, but that I didn't look back. Because once you realize your worth isn't in what you offer, but in what you endured, there's no going back to smallness. No going back to silence. No going back to rooms where you have to bleed to be seen. And that's what this whole journey was. Not revenge for the sake of revenge, but release. A quiet, undeniable declaration. I matter to me, and I always will. A year passed like an exhale I didn't know I'd been holding. One quiet morning, a small white envelope landed in my mailbox, handwritten, gold-inked, with my full name spelled perfectly. It wasn't from Natalie. It was from a girl named Jada, one of the first I mentored. Inside was a wedding invitation. Simple, thoughtful, no expectation, just love. "I wanted you there," she'd scribbled at the bottom. "You taught me I didn't have to shrink to be chosen." I sat with that for a long time. Not the invitation itself, but the fact of it being remembered included not for what I could give, but for who I was. The week of Jada's wedding, I found myself near my old life, near the venue that once held my sister's dreams and my quiet destruction. I stopped outside, just for a moment. It was booked, lively, buzzing with music and laughter and something real. Not ours. Someone else's celebration. Someone else's joy. A part of me waited for the ache, but it didn't come. Across town, I heard Natalie had moved back in with our parents. The wedding never happened. Tyler moved cities. Their Instagram profiles were curated silence, aesthetic quotes, and blurry coffee cups that didn't hide the unraveling. They never reached out again. Not really. There were no apologies, no reckoning, no healing talks over coffee. And that's okay. Closure didn't come from them. It came from walking past the place where I'd once handed over my heart, gift-wrapped and ignored, and realizing I wasn't mourning it anymore. That venue? It wasn't mine to grieve, because I was never supposed to be standing on that stage. I was just the scaffolding, the backstage crew, the person who paid for the lights and got told to dim them. They built their stage on my generosity, but I was never part of their play. Now, I write my own. Every post I share, every girl I mentor, every dollar I spend on building something that gives back, not drains. I matter in rooms where I'm not invisible. I'm seen by people who don't smirk when I show love, who don't treat kindness like currency, who don't make me audition for belonging. And no, I don't sit at that table anymore. The one where love was conditional, where I had to keep serving just to be allowed to stay. I left the table. They stayed hungry.